The heavy oak door creaked open as Eleanor stepped once again into the mansion's drawing room, the air thick with the scent of aged wood and lingering memories. Today she had invited the family members who had arrived in recent days to share their stories about the mansion's past. The hope was to untangle the web of secrets that the letters had begun to reveal. Margaret Sinclair was already seated by the grand fireplace, her silver-streaked hair pinned meticulously, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Charles Bramwell loomed near the window, arms crossed, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Agnes Whitmore, the eccentric aunt, shuffled in last, her colourful shawl trailing behind her like a living tapestry. "Thank you all for coming," Eleanor began, setting down her notebook. "I believe that understanding the past is essential for uncovering the truth. Each of you has a connection to this place, and I would like to hear your memories and stories about the mansion and our family." Margaret was the first to speak, her voice calm yet tinged with a hint of pride. "This house has always been a symbol of our family's legacy. I recall my grandmother telling me about the grand balls held here, the laughter echoing through the halls, and the strength of our ancestors who built this estate." Charles scoffed lightly. "Romanticized tales, Margaret. The truth is darker. There were disputes over inheritance, bitter rivalries. I have documents that prove mismanagement and secrets that some would rather forget." His tone was sharp, almost accusing. Agnes settled into her armchair near the fire, her eyes twinkling mischievously. "Oh, you two are far too serious. This mansion has seen love and betrayal, secrets whispered in the dead of night. I remember hearing stories of a forbidden romance, a betrayal so deep it tore the family apart. The spirits of those days still linger here, you know." Eleanor listened intently, scribbling notes as the voices overlapped, each story contradicting the last. Margaret spoke of honor and tradition. Charles painted a picture of greed and deception. Agnes wove tales that danced between fact and folklore. The mansion seemed to breathe with the tension in the room. As the discussion grew heated, Eleanor noticed subtle exchanges between Charles and Margaret, a sideways glance here, a tightened jaw there. It was clear that beneath the surface, old wounds festered and loyalties were divided. Determined to find clarity, Eleanor proposed they examine the old records together. The group gathered around the large mahogany table, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows that danced over yellowed papers and faded photographs. Margaret pointed out a ledger. "Here, this entry shows a large sum missing during the estate's final years before it changed hands. It was hushed up at the time." Charles leaned in. "That confirms my suspicions. Someone wanted to cover their tracks." Agnes muttered, "Money and power have always been the root of the family's troubles, but there's much more that's never been spoken." Eleanor's heart pounded. The conflicting accounts only deepened the mystery, but they also illuminated the fractures that had long splintered the family. She realized that to uncover the truth, she would need to navigate these turbulent waters carefully, discerning fact from fiction, trust from deceit. The meeting ended with no clear resolution, but Eleanor was left with a sharper sense of the obstacles ahead. Outside, the wind howled through the gnarled trees surrounding the mansion, as if echoing the unrest within its walls. As Eleanor closed her notebook, a quiet determination settled over her. The mansion's history was a puzzle of conflicting stories, but somewhere within the tangled web of memories and lies lay the key to the century-old murder. She was resolved to find it, even if it meant confronting the very family she had just begun to understand. But as the candle flickered out, Eleanor wondered which version of the past was true, and who would be willing to protect their secrets at any cost. The answers, she knew, would not come easily. The night deepened, and so did the shadows surrounding the mansion's legacy, ready to reveal their truths or consume those who dared to seek them. The afternoon sun filtered weakly through the stained glass of the mansion's study, casting fractured colors onto the worn pages of the ledger Eleanor held open on her lap. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of aged parchment. Harold Whitcomb leaned forward, his fingers steepled beneath his chin as he regarded the brittle document with a scholar's reverence. "This ledger," Harold began, his voice low and deliberate, "is one of the few surviving records of the Blake family's possessions, catalogue of valuables dating back to the late 1800s. It is here that the first mention of the brooch appears." Eleanor's eyes traced the faded ink that listed items with meticulous detail. There it was, the Whitcomb sapphire brooch, priceless, family heirloom. The entry was dated a mere week before the murder that had shadowed the family for generations. "A sapphire brooch," Eleanor murmured, lifting her gaze to meet Harold's. "Why does this matter?" Harold's expression darkened. "Because, Eleanor, it vanished the night of the murder. No one has ever found it since. Some believe its disappearance is the key to understanding what truly happened that dreadful night." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the ledger. The weight of history suddenly felt tangible, pressing against her chest like the mansion's oppressive atmosphere. Determined to learn more, Eleanor sought out Mrs. Agnes Porter, the mansion's longtime housekeeper, in the dim servants' quarters, where the sunlight was scant and the scent of mothballs mingled with aged wood. Mrs. Porter shared hushed tales passed between the household staff. "The brooch was more than just a jewel," Mrs. Porter whispered, her eyes darting nervously. "It was a symbol of status and power. When it disappeared, so did the peace of this house." Eleanor listened intently as Mrs. Porter recounted rumors of secret exchanges and veiled threats, a tapestry woven from whispers and half-truths. Later, as Eleanor examined the letters she had found in the attic, a vivid scene materialized in her mind. A storm raged outside, lightning illuminating a room thick with tension. Voices rose in interrogations, hurled like daggers over the glittering sapphire brooch that caught the flickering candlelight, its facets a silent witness to the unfolding drama. Eleanor's heart pounded as she read between the lines, piecing together a story of betrayal and greed, where the loss of the heirloom was not merely an unfortunate coincidence but a catalyst for violence. Standing alone in the grand hallway, Eleanor's gaze swept over the ornate woodwork and faded portraits that lined the walls. The echoes of footsteps, real or imagined, stirred the stillness around her. The mansion seemed to breathe its secrets, and Eleanor felt the weight of her discovery settle upon her. The missing heirloom was no longer just a lost jewel. It was a key one that might unlock the truth behind a century-old murder. With renewed resolve, Eleanor prepared to delve deeper, knowing that each step forward risked stirring shadows best left undisturbed. But the truth, she reminded herself, was worth any danger. The brooch was missing, but the story it left behind was waiting to be uncovered, piece by painful piece. As evening fell, the mansion seemed to hold its breath, the secrets of the past entwined with the fate of the present. Eleanor's investigation was no longer just a pursuit of facts, it was a journey into the heart of a family's darkest hour, with the lost heirloom gleaming like a beacon amid the shadows. And somewhere within the walls, the answers awaited. The heavy oak doors of the drawing room creaked shut behind Eleanor as she stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of aged wood and faint traces of lavender from a long-forgotten sachet. The dim candlelight wavered in the low light, casting shifting shadows that danced along the ornate wallpaper, as if the very walls themselves were alive with secrets. Around her, The assembled family members murmured uneasily, their polite veneer cracking under the weight of unspoken truths. Eleanor's gaze settled firmly on Margaret Hawthorne, who sat with a poised grace that belied the tension in her tightly clasped hands. "Margaret," Eleanor began, her voice steady but edged with quiet challenge. "You've been wonderfully forthcoming about the family's history, but there are still gaps, particularly about the lost heirloom. Can you explain why such an important piece would simply vanish without a trace?" Margaret's eyes flickered briefly, a shadow passing over her composed expression. "The heirloom's disappearance has been a painful mystery for decades," she replied smoothly, "and I assure you, I have no desire to conceal anything." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. "Yet you declined to answer my earlier letters on this matter. And Charles, as the family lawyer, surely you have records that could shed light on this." The room shifted uncomfortably as Charles Everett adjusted his glasses. "My duty is to protect the family's interests," he said cautiously. "Some matters are better left undisturbed." "But what if those matters are precisely what we need to uncover?" Eleanor pressed, stepping forward. "If the murder and the missing heirloom are connected, then silence only serves to protect the guilty." A sharp clink startled everyone as a teacup slipped from an unsteady hand and shattered against the marble hearth. The sudden noise broke the fragile calm, and murmurs swelled into whispered accusations. Simon Blake, standing near the doorway, observed quietly. His eyes narrowed as he caught a fleeting glance exchanged between Margaret and a shadowed figure in the corner, a look heavy with implication. The alliances within this family were shifting, fragile and dangerous. Outside, the first raindrops began to tap against the window panes, the soft pattering growing into a steady rhythm. It was as if the storm outside echoed the turmoil within the walls of the mansion. Eleanor's heart raced with a mixture of fear and resolve. This was no longer just a quest for answers. It was a dangerous game, where every word could provoke a misstep, every revelation could bring retribution, but she was determined. No matter the cost, she would uncover the full truth buried beneath decades of silence and deceit. As the rain intensified, so did the tension in the room. Eleanor's voice cut through the rising storm. "I will not be deterred. The past will speak, whether you wish it to or not." The family members exchanged uneasy glances, the fragile mask of civility fracturing. In that moment, Eleanor knew the path ahead would be fraught with peril, but also that the secrets of the mansion were finally beginning to surface. This dangerous game had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. The heavy oak door creaked softly as Eleanor stepped into the mansion's grand library, a room she had come to regard as the heart of the sprawling estate. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and polished wood, a comforting aroma that belied the dark secrets she was uncovering. On the desk lay a small, dust-covered box that had not been opened since the previous occupant's disappearance. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the lid, revealing a stack of fragile letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. Among them, an unassuming, yellowed envelope caught her eye. It was sealed with a deep, red wax emblem, a crest she recognized from earlier letters, but had never before seen in such pristine condition. Carefully, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter within. The ink was faded, yet legible, and the handwriting was elegant, but hurried, the lines wavering as though penned in emotional turmoil. The letter began with a quiet declaration of guilt and a detailed account of a crime long whispered about but never spoken aloud, a murder that had shattered the family a century ago. The author confessed to the deed, describing the motive, the exact moment, and the aftermath with chilling clarity. Eleanor's breath caught as she read. This could be the smoking gun she had sought, the key to unraveling the mystery that had haunted the mansion for generations. Yet, as she reread the letter, subtle inconsistencies troubled her, phrases that seemed out of place for the time period, anachronistic word choices, and a tone that felt rehearsed rather than raw. Could this truly be a confession, or was it a clever forgery designed to manipulate whoever found it? Determined to find answers, Eleanor sought out Mr. Alistair Crane, the enigmatic visitor who had appeared just days prior, claiming intimate knowledge of the mansion's history. She found him in the parlor, seated near the tall windows as rain traced silver rivulets down the glass. The storm outside cast a somber mood over the room, the flickering candlelight battling the shadows that clung to the corners. Holding the letter between them, Eleanor watched his eyes closely. "What do you make of this?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot of suspicion tightening in her chest. Alistair took the letter, his fingers brushing the fragile paper with reverence. He murmured, "The contents are compelling, but I have my doubts. The handwriting does not match known samples from the family archives, nor does the tone align with the character of the supposed author. So it could be a plant," Eleanor pressed. "Possibly," he said, his gaze distant. "Or perhaps an attempt to shift blame, to rewrite history in favor of someone long gone." Before Eleanor could respond, the soft sound of footsteps approached. Mrs. Agnes Porter, the housekeeper and guardian of the mansion's secrets, entered quietly, her face etched with a mixture of concern and weariness. "Miss Blake," she began gently, "I must urge caution. There are things about this family about that night that are better left undisturbed. Not all truths are kind, and some letters are meant to deceive." Eleanor nodded, feeling the weight of the warning but unwilling to turn away. "I need to know, Mrs. Porter. I need the truth." That evening, with the rain still tapping its relentless rhythm against the windows, Eleanor returned to the library. The fire crackled in the hearth, its warm light a stark contrast to the cold dread settling in her bones. She spread the letter alongside others she had collected, cross-referencing details and timelines. Each revelation brought her closer to the heart of the mystery, but also deeper into a web of deceit and half-truths. As the night deepened, Eleanor's resolve hardened. Whoever had penned that letter, whether guilty, innocent, or manipulative, had ignited a fire that would not be easily extinguished. The mansion's shadows grew longer, and the past whispered louder than ever. She was bound now, not just by inheritance, but by a promise to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Yet, as she closed the letter and looked out into the darkened grounds, a chilling thought took root. What if the confession was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a far more dangerous game? The candle flickered once more, casting a fleeting shadow across the page, as Eleanor prepared herself for the trials still to come. The atmosphere in the Victorian mansion had grown palpably tense. Eleanor Blake, her journalistic instincts sharpened by weeks of painstaking investigation, had reached a critical juncture. The letters, the whispered stories, the veiled glances, they all pointed to fractures beneath the surface of the family's polished facade. That evening, in the drawing room warmed by the flickering firelight, Eleanor met with Samuel Hartley, the enigmatic relative whose knowledge of the mansion's past had proved invaluable. "Samuel," Eleanor began, her voice low but steady, "these letters imply more than just old grievances. There's betrayal here hidden, carefully guarded, but who stands to gain from this silence?" Her fingers traced the edges of a yellowed envelope. The ink faded, yet the words still sharp. Samuel leaned closer, his piercing blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "I've seen enough to know that not everyone here is as they seem. Margaret, for one, guards her secrets like a fortress. Yet, Thomas's nervousness suggests he too carries burdens he'd rather bury. Their whispered conversation was interrupted by the distant clatter of silverware from the dining hall. Eleanor and Samuel exchanged a knowing glance before moving toward the source of the tension. There, Margaret Sinclair stood, her cold gaze fixed on Thomas Redford. "You think your silence shields you," she accused, her voice slicing through the air. "I know about your dealings, Thomas. You've been less than honest with us all." Thomas shifted uncomfortably, his stocky frame tense. "I'm only trying to protect what's left of this family," he retorted, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. The confrontation left Eleanor unsettled. Back in the solitude of the attic, moonlight filtering through the dusty window, she unfolded a letter that had somehow eluded her scrutiny until now. The words revealed a betrayal from decades past, one that redefined the narrative she had been piecing together. The weight of the revelation settled heavily on her chest, a mixture of shock and sorrow washing over her. Outside, a sudden thunderstorm erupted, the rumble of thunder mirroring the turmoil within the mansion's walls. Eleanor and Samuel exchanged wary glances, understanding that the fragile alliances they had formed might soon be tested beyond repair. Trust was a rare commodity here, and betrayal lurked in every shadow. As Eleanor closed the letter, a steely resolve took hold. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but uncovering the truth meant navigating the treacherous waters of family loyalty and deception. Her investigation had become more than a search for answers. It was a battle to distinguish friend from foe in a house built on secrets. With the storm raging outside, Eleanor prepared herself for the challenges to come, knowing that each revelation brought her closer to the heart of the century-old murder and to the darkest corners of the family's past. The afternoon sun had long dipped below the horizon by the time Eleanor Blake found herself once more at the heart of the mansion's mysteries. Her fingers traced the spines of the dusty tomes lining the vast library wall, eyes scanning for any sign of a hidden mechanism. The mansion, with its endless corridors and creaking floorboards, felt alive, watchful, almost as if it guarded its secrets jealously. The hush of silence was punctuated only by the occasional groan of aged timber settling into the night. "There must be something here," Eleanor murmured, her voice steady yet low. She stepped back, considering the bookshelf before her. It was an imposing structure, stretching from floor to ceiling, laden with leather-bound volumes and yellowed manuscripts. Her gaze fixed on a slight irregularity, faint outline in the woodwork, a seam too precise for mere chance. "You never told me you were a locksmith," came a gruff voice from behind. Startled, Eleanor turned to see Horace Finch, the mansion's caretaker, his weathered face illuminated by the flickering glow of a lantern. "I'm not," she replied with a faint smile, "but I know a thing or two about hidden compartments. Sometimes you just have to push, pull, or pry." She stepped forward, pressing her palm flat against the wood. A soft click echoed in the stillness as the shelf shuddered, swinging inward on hidden hinges to reveal a narrow passageway cloaked in darkness. "By the heavens," Horace muttered, peering inside. "I never knew this was here." The air that greeted them was stale and heavy, laced with the scent of mildew and forgotten years. Eleanor lit a candle, its flame trembling as she stepped cautiously into the passage. The narrow corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, the walls lined with peeling wallpaper and thick cobwebs. Each step stirred a cloud of dust, particles dancing in the candlelight like restless spirits. At the corridor's end, a heavy wooden door barred their path. Eleanor's breath caught as she reached out, tracing the intricate carvings obscured beneath layers of grime. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open, its hinges groaning in protest. The room beyond was small, claustrophobic, and suffused with an oppressive silence. Inside lay the remnants of a past shrouded in darkness. A faded bloodstain marred the floorboards, its edges irregular and disturbing. A shattered mirror lay in fragments, reflecting shards of candlelight like fractured memories. Against one wall stood a locked chest, its iron clasp ornate and unyielding. Horace cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "This place, it's where they hid it all, isn't it?" Eleanor nodded, her eyes scanning the scattered papers strewn across a rickety desk. She picked up a leather-bound diary, its cover cracked and brittle. The pages inside were filled with hurried scrawls, confessions, names, and dates that sent a chill down her spine. "It's all here," she whispered. "Everything they tried to bury." As they sifted through the evidence, the mansion seemed to close in around them. Suddenly, a faint creak echoed from the floor above. Eleanor's heart thudded painfully against her ribs. "Did you hear that?" she asked, voice barely audible. Horace's eyes narrowed. "We're not alone down here." They gathered the documents swiftly, the weight of the secrets pressing heavily upon them. The discovery of the secret room and the damning evidence within was a turning point. No longer was the murder an enigma confined to old letters and whispered rumors. It had manifested into tangible truth, ripe with danger and deception. Eleanor's mind raced. Who else could know about this hidden chamber? Was the creak merely the house settling, or a warning from a shadowy observer? The stakes of her investigation had escalated, entangling her ever deeper in a web of family secrets and peril. The candle flickered once more, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts along the peeling wallpaper. Eleanor closed the diary with a resolute snap. "We have to be more careful now," she said firmly. "This changes everything." Outside the secret room, the mansion held its breath, waiting for the next move in a game that had begun more than a century ago and was far from over.